If we assess TCL's television products against the HDR standard, you'll find that many TCL products excel in picture reproduction, even surpassing HDR standards. Hey everyone, welcome to TCL's channel. I'm sure all you tech enthusiasts out there have heard of the term HDR. It often pops up in the realms of photography and display technology, but many folks still aren't quite clear on what it really means. So, what exactly is HDR? What does the HDR label on TVs indicate? What are the different specifications of HDR currently available? And what kind of hardware do you need to support it? Well, with all these questions in mind, today's video is here to answer them all for you. First, let's tackle the most fundamental question. What is HDR? HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. Dynamic range is a broad concept applied across various fields like displays, music, signals, and more. Essentially, we can think of it as the range of difference between the maximum and minimum values. In the realm of displays, dynamic range is primarily about the differences in brightness and color. Take a look at the image in front of you. Initially, it might seem flat and lifeless, but by introducing varying levels of brightness, the image gains depth with highlights and shadows. Add in a range of colors, and suddenly the picture becomes vibrant and lively, offering a more intense sensory experience. When it comes to HDR on televisions, it's essentially a generic term representing the hardware's capability to support a wider display dynamic range. Different colors are displayed distinctly under various brightness levels, known as the Helmholtz-Kohlrausch effect, indicating support for a broader color space, ensuring every detail of the picture is vividly rendered. HDR actually comes in various specifications, with the most common standards being HDR10, HDR10+, HLG, and Dolby Vision, among others. Today, we'll focus on discussing HDR10, HDR10+, and Dolby Vision. Let's start with HDR10. It's the foundational standard for HDR and the most widely used one at present. It supports a 10-bit color depth, whereas standard dynamic range only supports an 8-bit color depth. The higher the bit depth, the more nuanced the colors can be. For instance, with a 10-bit color depth, it can display up to 1.07 billion colors. HDR10 adopts PQ, a technology proposed by Dolby Laboratories. This method records brightness values in actual numbers. The HDR10 standard using PQ supports peak brightness ranging from 1000 nits to 4000 nits. However, many contents have actual brightness values far exceeding 4000 nits. Therefore, if the hardware's peak brightness is higher, it can better reproduce the real picture. But if the display device can only reach a peak brightness of 1200 nits, scenes above 1200 nits cannot be accurately displayed. However, devices can compress the brightness above 1200 nits using certain rules and proportions, allowing for the presentation of more detail. Now, let's talk about HDR10+.
HDR10 Plus and HDR10 have different metadata processing methods, and HDR10 Plus has a higher degree of restoration for the screen.
It's an enhancement of HDR10 with various advancements in data technology. Similarly, it supports a 10-bit color depth, but with a peak brightness reaching up to 4000 nits. Therefore, under the same PQ curve, it can reproduce more highlights, allowing reflections of different objects in the video to be closer to their real brightness. What about Dolby Vision? Dolby Vision, as the name suggests, is a standard proposed by Dolby. Compared to HDR10 and HDR10+, it is more standardized. Similar to the former two, Dolby Vision supports a wider dynamic range and can also display brightness levels significantly exceeding the limits of the display device through a certain degree of compression. However, What sets it apart is that most devices that support Dolby Vision have Dolby's exclusive chipsets built in. Other manufacturers need authorization from Dolby to display content in the Dolby Vision standard. In terms of display effects, when the peak brightness of a device is within 4000 nits, there is no difference in perception among the three standards. However, if the peak brightness exceeds 4000 nits, devices supporting Dolby Vision provide a better viewing experience. TCL's flagship products, with peak brightness far exceeding 4000 nits, can better reproduce the real world as perceived by the human eye in actual display scenarios. So, what hardware support does HDR require? Based on the earlier discussion, you'll find that brightness and color are the most crucial aspects of HDR. Therefore, the brightness, local dimming, and color gamut of the TV screen are the most important hardware components for HDR. Firstly, there's peak brightness. As we mentioned earlier, the higher the peak brightness, the wider the range of brightness that can be reproduced when playing videos using the PQ curve. This results in a higher degree of fidelity in reproducing the brightness of real-world objects. At the same time, precise local dimming is essential for HDR TVs. This entails the ability to control the TV's backlighting in separate zones, turning off the backlight in areas displaying pure black, thereby enhancing contrast and revealing details in dark areas, ultimately enhancing the performance of HDR content. Furthermore, color reproduction is equally crucial. HDR TVs must be capable of displaying a wider color gamut to present richer colors and finer color details in HDR content. Therefore, TVs should have higher color depth and more precise color calibration. Combining all this information, if we assess TCL's television products against the HDR standard, you'll find that many TCL products excel in picture reproduction, even surpassing HDR standards. In terms of brightness, TCL's QD Mini LED products can reach a peak brightness of up to 6500 nits, far exceeding the HDR10 Plus standard of 4000 nits. In terms of light control, TCL's QD Mini LED products boast over 10,000 backlight zones, allowing for precise control of backlighting and achieving the ultra-high contrast required for HDR. In terms of color, TCL's QD Mini LED products feature upgraded quad quantum dot filtering materials, achieving a color gamut value of 98%, which allows for the reproduction of rich and nuanced colors. TCL's X955 takes it even further with a peak brightness of 5000 nits and a contrast ratio of 10 million to 1. When it comes to controlling light, the X955 Max with its staggering 20,000 plus zones achieves pixel level dimming precision. Overall, TCL's picture quality even surpasses HDR's display capabilities, enabling it to reproduce the rich details and colors found in the real world. Alright, that wraps up today's discussion on HDR. I hope it has provided you with a more comprehensive understanding of HDR. And if you're considering getting a TV that supports HDR, why not give TCL a try? With displays that surpass HDR standards, you're sure to experience the ultimate visual enjoyment.